Just a little while ago, Boca won at La Bombonera in their debut in this 2025 Apertura. Claudio Úbeda's team starts off with a victory in this 2026 in this first match of the championship on this opening day. Úbeda's team ended up beating Riestra 1-0 after their championship debut. And we're going to talk about Boca's victory at the start of Argentine football, this return to official competition in Argentine football. So let's start this reaction. So we ask all of you watching to leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And this is how we start talking about Boca's victory, this Boca win, beyond what happened in the match itself. Beyond Lautaro's goal di Lolo, it can't be explained without first talking a bit, without first describing a bit what the match itself was like. Up until the 30th minute, honestly, the headline left by the match and Boca's first appearance. A Sunday afternoon with a lot of heat at the end of January. It was a team that couldn't beat Riestra at home. The truth is that Boca, in a way, ends up covering up some issues and some shortcomings. Valencia's from this match with the win, because if the game had ended 0-0, we could say that Boca ended up playing their first home game in this opening. 2026, the year Boca returns to the Copa Libertadores, and expectations for Boca are renewed and rise significantly. Thinking about what the last few years have been like for Ceniza, after the last Boca that was up to the task, the one that reached the Copa Libertadores final, we have to go back almost 3 years to talk about a competitive Boca, so that's why the expectations and the bar for Boca this year are very high, and we'll see if they're up to it or not. But what did this match mean for Úbeda's team? First for the coach that everyone talked about so much. Whether he stays, leaves, or can handle it. Is he right for the division? He might coach one of the last Copa Libertadores that Juan Román Riquelme could have as president, because after that, a very important year is coming, a political year for Boca. That's why it's important to point out that Juan Román Riquelme is taking a big gamble with Úbeda and Úbeda. He also had to support the president a bit today in this first match, and Boca ended up winning it. I think there's something we need to highlight about Boca. Beyond the fact that the match ended in their favor, the match was ultimately won by CNIC. Something I think is worth pointing out about Úbeda's team today, it's that they tried in several ways. They didn't have just one playbook. Yes, maybe one or another playbook they used to open up the match. Honestly, it wasn't the most elegant team. It wasn't the most precise team. No, of course, with its shortcomings, with its mistakes, but they tried. It's a team that in the first half, Boca won. Boca overwhelmed Riestra. Boca ran over Riestra. They deserve to at least have an advantage in the first half. There are two plays especially that are very impressive because of how Boca couldn't open up the game in that situation. The first is a header that Arki saves down low in a great way, and the second is a great play. Actually, it's a cross from Lautaro Blanco that ends up hitting the inside of the post. And is it really hard to rest, to ride a little? How did that ball not end up being a goal? Well, the truth is, it's a very particular situation which is hard to explain. How does Boca not open the scoring there now after that little spell from Boca where they end up overwhelming Riestra? Úbeda's team ended up performing poorly in this first half because it was almost like the first half ended with Riestra coming out on top. They skipped the first 15-20 minutes like they were playing away. No matter how defensive your strategy, they'll eventually overwhelm you with momentum, pressure, and the stadium's energy. And they end up skipping them, and what's more, even in the first half, Riestra ends up saying, well, so far our plan is working, maybe not perfectly, but it was working well. Because after those minutes, Boca barely threatened the goal, as their best stretch was that brief period. Aside from the first 15-20 minutes and the start of the second half, nothing else really happened in the match. It was the opening minutes of both halves when we had chances. Otherwise, there were hardly any. Boca tried. Against a Riestra team that's very clever, very sharp, and a team that's very well prepared tactically. And Riestra is a team that you can't criticize tactically at all. We can say that maybe they don't have players who are suited for a first division, but it's a team that's well prepared. It's a team that gives everything for every ball, and that's also why they're such a tough team for the rest of the teams in Argentine football. For what Riestra is and how this team usually plays as visitors, this wasn't their best match. It was a decent match, but I think Boca ended up winning with very little because Riestra is a team that's maybe used to being attacked constantly, and Riestra just holds on and tries to resist and resist. Well, today it didn't end up that way because of a set piece. And here I want to talk about Leandro Paredes. I want to take a minute to talk about Leandro Paredes. As time passed, I wondered if Leandro Paredes' debut was really that bad. In this year, 2026, the year when he's fighting for his spot on the World Cup roster, the year when he has to start proving himself again. Seriously, his return to Boca, and the year when, finally, he maybe had some time to adapt, first with the group and first with his physical condition. Because we all know that when Leandro Paredes arrived, he wasn't in the best shape to join a high-level team. Even in Argentine football, and though Paredes comes from Europe, Argentine football is still different. There's less play, but you run more, it's more physical, there are fewer spaces, and I don't know if it's harder, but it's very complicated. Argentine football isn't as tough as Europe's, which is on another level, but that doesn't mean it's easy. That's why I want to highlight this last thing about Leandro Paredes, that even though he didn't have a great match, he ended up finishing with about 7 points thanks to the assist. Because for better or worse, Leandro Paredes is the one who crosses the ball for Boca's goal, and that ends up making a difference. And here comes one of the things that at times we might criticize other teams for, but today we have to acknowledge it for Boca. Set pieces, and aerial balls. It's something that this team has clearly been working on, as they already showed last year. There are many goals where Paredes ends up being crucial with a cross, whether it's to open the score or to force a play that later results in a Boca goal. It could be a Paredes cross resulting in a penalty or a save leading to a goal after a corner. That's why I want to highlight what Leandro Paredes does. When Paredes has the ball and looks for a teammate, that's really where he makes the difference. That's where he stands out. In terms of creating plays, it's still lacking. Paredes has been weak and hasn't contributed much. You think a player like Paredes, with his experience and having played in Argentine football, would be familiar with this league. Having played here at the beginning, then in Europe with the Argentina national team, and now back in this league, you'd expect him to make a through pass to open up the game. He did today, but Paredes' first was only in the 28th minute of the second half. And that makes me think that Paredes' performance today is only redeemable because of the assist, but there's still something missing. And then I want to talk about Boca's goalkeeper, because the Boca goalkeeper who raises so many doubts today in the only clear situation. The truth is, Riestra only truly threatened the opponent's goal once. In the second half, when Bracamonte's three-finger shot was saved. Yes, he ended up sending it to the corner, and that's what Boca's goalkeeper has to do. I think it was a positive game for Boca from the defensive side. Great game from Di Lolo and Ayrton Costa. I preferred Ayrton Costa. He played a better first half, but Di Lolo got all the spotlight. Not just because he had a stronger second half than the former Independiente player, but also because he later scored the goal in attack. Boca's situation makes sense, and it's clear why Hansen isn't playing. Hansen just isn't ready for Boca's first team. He played out of position today due to Berenguer and Cavani's injuries, but Hansen's performance was still very weak regardless. Your attitude tried to bring some energy to the game that you could have contributed to the UEA team, but in the end, it was weak. Very good behind Changuito Ceballos. If Changuito Ceballos gets strong support from a forward like Berenguer or someone similar, I think it will help. I think we're going to have a great year. With today's winger, Boca won. In their championship debut, Boca nearly made headlines everywhere. On Monday, a fiasco tying with Riestra at home. But they ended up winning, and deservedly so, because they were the team that deserved to win the match. The only one that really tried to take all 3 points. We invite you to leave your like, to comment, to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. As always, I invite you to follow the Falso Nueve television channel, and below you'll also find the social media links. See you next time. Bye.